And I want to push on now with the next presentation. So thanks again, Thorsten. All right, guys. The final presentation that I've got for you here today before we do our midday break is a personal one, and it's sort of I guess it's closest probably to mindset than anything else. But I think you'll see that there's a few good takeaways from it. So how's everyone feeling? Is everyone hanging in there? We've been going for 2 hours now. Give me a bit of feedback in the question box. Any golden nuggets that you've taken away so far that you want to go ahead and implement? Would love to hear what they are. I'll take a sip of water here. All right, sounds like people are still engaged. When we do live events in person, the presentation that I never really want to give is the one right before lunch. The one right before lunch is when people, are starting to get a little bit tired, starting to get a little bit burnt out, perhaps energy is waning, and the later on in the day, the more challenging it tends to get. So anyway, I'm going to ask if you can make a huge effort just to stick with me here, and if I can, I'll see if I can wrap this one up in under an hour, and then we can take a break and we'll come back a couple of hours after that. Okay. All right. So the title of this presentation is How to Get There from Here. And that's going to make sense as we dive into this. It's a presentation that's about change, growth, mindset, cause and effect, and a whole bunch of personal examples that I'm going to weave in here. Just before I go any further, can you give me a 1 if you can still see my screen okay? You should be able to see me there as well. Just want to make sure the tech is working. Yep, cool. Okay, so let's keep pushing on. So as I mentioned, this presentation is really about personal growth. It's about mindset. It's about cause and effect. It's about reverse engineering success in your life, which is something I'm pretty passionate about. Here are a couple of photos of my kids, my little ones. These are about 6 months old now. My daughter is 4 years old, and my son is 6 years old. And for me, and I think anyone with kids will understand this, they're a great marker of time, because you wake up one day and your kids are not babies anymore, and then they're not kids anymore. And just seeing them evolve as little humans. I had that quite present when I was putting this presentation together. So yes, my daughter does have hair like that every morning when she wakes up. Anyway, and that was a confidence course that my son is doing there. That was in the French Alps that I mentioned earlier, and he loves outdoor adventures. I think his hero is probably Bear Grylls, for those of you that know that. Though of him, that's an outdoor adventurer, I guess you could say. So he loves all that kind of a thing. Getting into the presentation now, I think believing who you are has a bigger impact on your growth than anything else. And I'm going to try to tie this in as we push forward here. I think most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So thinking about your online business, you might have huge goals, things that you want to achieve in the next 12 months. Have you overestimated them? Maybe, I don't know. It depends what they are. But I can tell you what, you've probably underestimated what you could do in 10 years. And when I look back to where I was 1 decade ago, and when I look back to where I was 2 decades ago, it's amazing, the growth curve. And I think when you consciously try to push forward, you can keep that growth curve going, but it's also very easy to plateau when you get into a comfort zone. And if you want to grow your online business, then, ultimately you're going to probably have to break through a plateau or two in order to do that. So I think there are certain time spans and moments that really shape your life. This is a history of my life in on one slide there. And childhood for me, basically from 0 through to 18 when I finished high school. And I moved away from home at 18 to pursue university. I had a year living in the UK when I was 12. My whole family went over there for a year. And I think this opened my eyes enormously. young kid from a rural background in New Zealand, traveling 24 hours to London and living in the UK for a year was amazing. And I think that was definitely like a magical moment in my life. Then young adult. So leaving home at 18, I traveled and worked, did a ski season in the United States when I was 20. I finished up university. That took 4 years and got a job. But I shifted to Argentina when I was 22. And I feel like when I was sort of like in this young adult phase when I was studying at university between the ages of 18 and 21 or 22. And adulthood really started when I think I sort of left New Zealand and I shifted over to Argentina with 22 years of age or came to Argentina, I think for the first time when I was 22 and started forging a life and really got thrown in the deep end. And if I think about my motivators at different points in time, it's gone through sort of survival, through having a point to prove, autonomy, status, responsibility, legacy, and values. So other important sort of turning points in my life or moments that have really shaped my life are things like making my first dollar online. That happened in 2005. Buying my first property. That happened in 2006. Learning Spanish. Never thought I was going to speak Spanish. But wake up one day and I've been in Argentina for, 17, 18 years. Taking a side hustle, turning it into a mature business and having kids. So the reason I'm sharing this is because we're going to be walking through a bit of a journey here. And before I get to some of the lessons, I want to recap a little bit on a couple of decades of triumph and how that path has taken shape. I think you can change your life a lot when you make a focused and disciplined effort to do it. I don't think most people do that. Most people float along in the current of life and they end up where they end up. But if you make a conscious effort to do something new and to achieve something specific, you can achieve it. And I think kudos to every single person on this workshop because you are here. You are part of 123 Profit, and you're working hard, regardless of results that you may or may not have achieved. You're working hard to do something which could mark not just your life, but legacy and years to come and lives to come. So I'm going to go through some different stages now. So this is basically from the last 20 years of my life, from when I was about 20 through to today where I'm turning 40. Okay. So the first couple of years were the hustle years, and this is where I finished university and I had about a negative $30,000 loan and that was really when my financial year sort of started ticking, I guess, my financial clock. We're looking at 2003, 2004. And I think thinking back to this period of life, it was, I was living in pretty, basic conditions as far as first world goes. Malnourished, certainly, eating way too much fast food, willing to take a 24-hour bus ride instead of a 1-hour flight if it was going to save me $20, staying in hostels with a backpack, traveled with my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and we realized that we could, survive on about $3 a day if we ate gnocchis. That got old pretty quickly. Digging ditches out of necessity and really being a free spirit and having a lot of fun. So, there are a lot of things that might seem negative there, but it was a pretty fun time. And here are a few images that sort of sum this up. I had this beat up Ford Laser we used to live in this thing, drive it around, backpacking, traveling around the world with a backpack and nothing else. And that was one of the houses that I lived in as a poor, cold, malnourished student, but I had some of the best times of my life in that house. And that was where I started my online journey, diving in to, it was even before 2005, actually, diving into finding out ways I could make money online. The next sort of stage I had was what I call the comfort stage. And these would have been years 3 to 4 in my, my online journey. And this is when I got to a point where I was making good money. The first couple of years, I really struggled to get going, struggled to make money. And then I finally sort of started cracking the code, and I was able to establish a decent income online, to the point where I said, I'm never going to travel 24 hours on a bus ever again. And the objectives and thoughts and feelings at this point were, wow, this is real. Hotels in the suitcase. Yep, I'm going to upgrade from my backpack and hostel, and start staying in hotels in the suitcase. Traveling on planes instead of buses, thank God. Buying a property, advancing to Johnnie Walker Red. Is that even an upgrade? Getting a new car, and international vacations instead of, really sort of roughing it and focus on saving money, because all of a sudden I had disposable income. And this here these are a couple of photos, a couple of photos that represent, this part of my journey. So I bought my first property in 2006, and I've got quite a large property portfolio now, spanning three different continents, and, got a lot of money in property. But this was the first property that kicked it all off. I bought this beat up studio in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, and literally knocked the walls down. And interesting story, when I was knocking the walls down, I knocked down one wall and it had money hidden inside it. So this is quite an old building in Argentina. And I found money stashed in the wall. So it wasn't gold coins, unfortunately. I think it was like Bolivian pesos or something, but they were pretty old. And someone had like cemented them up and hid them in the wall, maybe just in case. So I ripped all the walls down there, and we completely rebuilt that apartment. And I had it for about 10 years. It was basically the cheapest property I could buy at the time, but it got me on the property ladder. I spent about $30,000 to buy it, another $10,000 to do it up. And then a decade later, I sold it for about double that, sold it for about $80,000, $90,000. But during the 10 years that I had it, I've sold it now, it was something that gave me passive income month after month after month. And, it was a real struggle to buy that because I didn't have any money. I was still, just coming out of debt. But it was being thrown into the deep end of property. And it was the property transaction that I learned the most from. And then went on to use that experience to buy many, many properties, different types of properties all over the world. So that was, that was a pretty interesting thing for a 22, 23-year-old to do in another country where I didn't speak the language. But I loved every moment of it. The next stage was mastery. So this is year sort of 5 to 6 in that journey, making my first $1 million in a year, and started to travel business class. And this is when, I was already working with Steve Clayton, who many of you know, and there's a picture of Steve, which he would kill me if he knew I was sharing that one. But this is where I made my first $1 million online, and we're going back a long time now. That's probably 15, maybe 14 years ago, something like that. And that was when I realized, business class is the way to go, continuing that travel theme. Entry-level business class, though. I started focusing at this point on investment diversification, wrote a will, and upgraded to Johnnie Walker Black. So quite a significant upgrade, considering that, Johnnie Walker Red was considered okay before that. And really started using money as a tool at this point in time. So there you go. Entry-level business class. I don't think they had the pods like 14, 15 years ago, but it was still like a before and after for me, because I've always been quite careful with my money, and the idea of spending, thousands of dollars instead of $4,000 instead of $1,000 was like, am I crazy? But I soon realized that, getting to a place and feeling fresh the next day was so much more valuable to me. So anyway, that's another sort of point in time. The fourth phase is wealth. And this is really from years 7 and 8 in my business. And this is when I had a net worth of, beyond 10 million. I built up a significant property portfolio, and different investments were going well. My online business was thriving at this point in time. And my thoughts, feelings, and objectives here were, time is golden. Charity is becoming important to me. Wealth management is becoming important to me. I've got a holiday home. So I've got homes in multiple places. And Johnnie Walker is now at the blue stage. Do we have any Johnnie Walker drinkers here, by the way? I'm not a huge drinker, especially nowadays, but I do enjoy Johnnie Walker and Scotch from time to time when I'm not drinking amazing Argentine red wine. So anyway, you can for those of you that are you'll understand the analogy that I'm going through there. So red, black, and blue. But wealth management, and I realized then that I was getting more picky about the business class seat that I wanted, and obviously I'm joking about that, but definitely getting more selective about the things that I wanted. And there's a picture of Steve and I drinking. I don't know what that is, but it's not Johnnie Walker Blue. Somewhere in Miami, I think was that one. The next stage was legacy, and this is really the stage that I'm in now and have been in for quite a while. And it's where I'm asking myself, what do I really want in my life? What are the things that make me tick? What are the things that make me happy? And this is where, in terms of a net worth, we're talking like mid and much higher, sort of 8 figures at this point. And I'm asking myself, what can I do to make a lasting impact? What can I do to impact, philanthropy in my own little way, health and happiness, and what do I really, really want to be doing? That's a question that I come back to and I keep asking myself quite regularly. And a couple of images that I think capture this sort of moment that I'm at in my life. I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to support different charities. This one here is on the border of Venezuela and Colombia, I think it is. And we're helping children who are in, some pretty tough situations there. And we get photo updates from a whole community of children that we've been able to help. And it's life-changing for them. It's, it's not a lot of money in terms of, for me personally, but the money that we've been able to send to support the charity there is huge. I've been able to invest, I think, a couple of $100,000 in charities in India as well to build schools. So for me, kids are the I guess the demographic or the people you could say that I am most attracted to supporting. Maybe it's because I've got kids of my own, but I also know that they're the future as well. And then in terms of freedoms and flexibilities, there you can see I'm about to, I just got picked up in a helicopter that landed on my backyard at my holiday home in New Zealand. And it was flying me from the North Island of New Zealand to the South Island of New Zealand, just like a private helicopter flight. And I was doing a day of wine tasting before being dropped off back at my home in the evening. So I didn't have to worry about drink driving or anything like that because I was getting a helicopter to take me from one place to the other. And that for me was about making memories. My family came up for a ride in a helicopter, and then I did a day of wine tasting with my dad, my brother-in-law and his dad. And I was able to, fund the whole thing. And it was just, the kind of memories that I'll never forget. But coming back to, and here's another example. So I'm still digging ditches. Beats digging ditches is a saying that we use a lot in our business. But I could pay for someone to build a shed, but I really enjoyed building that shed with my son. I said earlier, he's a hands-on character, and it was good to be able to teach him about how to get out there and do something, and dig a trench and lay down foundations and actually build a shed. So I still get I get a kick out of that kind of thing as well when I'm not running my business. And I think there's a really quite simple formula to making massive life impacting change, and I boil it down to 4 steps. And this is really a conclusion that I've come to when I look back and reflect on a couple of decades. And there are 4 steps to getting to there from here. And the first is to identify, I think, what you really want your life to look like. Eliminate anything that's incongruent with that. Build a plan by working backwards, and then take massive action. And I cover a lot of these ideas inside the Mind Game, which is a course that everyone here has access to, and I would encourage you to go through. It's a 66 video course. It's designed to be consumed 1 video per day for 66 days, 66 because it's been proven that it takes 66 days to change a habit. So there's a ton of good information in there, and it's all built around this idea that your thoughts lead to your behaviors and your behaviors lead to your results. So if you agree with that, then I think you'll get a lot of value out of what we cover in the Mind Game. So speaking about that, thoughts to actions, actions to results, I think that ties in nicely with where we're starting here. Identify what you want your life to look like. Think more about who you want to become rather than the materialistic things that you want to have. I see a lot of people these days, especially young people, who are obsessed with the materialistic things. And, for me, I think for a lot of wealthy people, when you have generated a lot of wealth, the materialistic things are like a distant second or third in terms of importance. What's more important is who you are. And that should be the thing that drives your decisions and your actions. And you need to get clarity on what your real objectives are. Because if you don't have clarity on those, then you're not going to have a clear vision in your mind. Who do you really want to be? And what does that life look like? And there's no right or wrong answer here. I think it's great to just be able to think about this. And what would you like your life to look like? If you could design your perfect day, your perfect week, your perfect life, who would you be with? Where would you be? What would you be doing? And assuming a business had to be a part of that, what would that business look like? In terms of vision, I think this image and the next one, which is from the book, Be Your Future Self Now, is really good. Like if you've got a small vision, then you are limited. And even if you put a ton of effort in, you're going to be limited to the size of that vision. If you've got a big vision, though, and if it's detailed, it's so much easier to get to it. That's why I think it's interesting sometimes to sit down and think really carefully about what you want in your life and really try to visualize it, not from like a whole guru sort of perspective, but rather just think, what would you love your life to look like? What would make up your perfect life? And vividly imagine that. And I think then that gives you something to work towards. In terms of priorities, Jim Collins said, if you have more than 3, you don't have any. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think if there's one thing that I need to get better at, it's prioritizing my most important things. I know what my most important things are, but when I dive down into some of the areas, there are multiple things there. So, Steve and I, we've got 7 different, very successful online businesses at this point. But that's a lot of, that's a lot of distraction as well. It's worked out quite well for us. There are a couple of us, and we've put CEOs in charge of each one of the different businesses. But it's still 7 different things. Now, it is under one subject, though. It's still under one main thing, which is business. And I'll share that with you a little bit more in a moment. But I think when you've got more than just a few priorities, even just a few priorities in one area like business, you really struggle to get ahead. So for me, my priorities are family, health, and business. And then within each of these bubbles, you also need simplicity. So when I was saying I've got 7 different businesses that we've built out over the years, that's 7 different focuses inside that business one. Thankfully, I don't have to focus on all of them on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, it would just be unsustainable. We've put amazing people in charge of different areas so that we can still focus on just 1 or 2 things. How many online businesses, though, are you trying to build at the same time? I mean, I would say you probably want to limit this just to a couple. A couple, I think, hedges your bets and gives you a bit of diversification there and gives you more chances to succeed than just one. But if you're doing 3 or 4, you might want to rethink that, because that would probably give you a better chance of achieving what you want to achieve if you did have fewer goals there. So an example, let's say that you want to be earning $1 million a year from a business and you want to work 3 days a week on it and run it from anywhere. That might be a business goal. You want to be in good health. That's a pretty broad health goal, and you want to have an abundance of time to spend with family. You want to drill down into those for sure. It can be hard to work out what you want in your future, it can be challenging to get clarity around that. But one exercise that I've found works really well is asking yourself to imagine that you are 10 years more experienced, 10 years older than you are now. And what would that person tell you? So for me, what would 50-year-old Aidan, who's got a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, say to 40-year-old Aidan? He'd probably say, look, in a few years' time, your kids are not going to be kids anymore. Enjoy them, while they're young. Might say, you've still got a lot of energy. Utilize that to your advantage. It might be focused on, to be honest, most of what I think about nowadays is on building special moments with my family and helping people. So I'm sure that there would still be a lot of that as well. But I think this is a really good exercise. Ask yourself what your more experienced, older you might tell you. And it's not rocket science. Another way to think about this is if you have got a mentor, someone who's older than you, or it doesn't have to be older, just more experienced than you, or further down the path of where you want to get to, you could say, what would that person do? What would that person recommend to me in this situation? And I really love this one. From your future self's perspective, you are sitting on a gold mine. Think back to when you were 10 years younger and the gold mine that you were sitting on, you didn't necessarily even realize it. But in the past 10 years, a lot has probably happened in your life in different ways. You've probably been through, some great times and some tough times. And a lot of time has passed, 10 years. So right now, chances are you're still sitting on a gold mine. What are you going to do to make the most out of that in the decade ahead? So what is your 10-year older self like? I think this question really gets to who you want to become. So maybe it's an ever-present mum, dad, child, sibling. But what does that mean? Maybe it means that you never miss a soccer game, football game. Maybe it means you never miss a birthday party. Maybe it means walking the kids to school every day, or whatever it is. What about generosity? And what does that mean? Being charitable? What about being time rich? Maybe you've got an abundance of time. Maybe you're an active participant in the community. Maybe you're a loving partner, role model, philanthropist, whatever it might be. But what would you like your 10-year older self to be like? What characteristics would you like that person to have? Because that's who you're going to become. And I'll tell you one thing, your future self is going to be much different than you think. I mean, if I go back 2 decades to when I was 20, my 30-year-old self was incredibly different to what my 20-year-old self could have imagined. Even if I go back just 10 years to when I was 30, my 30-year-old self was so different, had such a different life to my 40-year-old self. When I was 30 years old, I didn't have kids. I was, cruising the world with my wife doing so. I mean, I had an established, very profitable business, but in terms of my life, it was just so much different. So this is, I think, true for most people. If you're 51 years old now, as a 61-year-old, your life is probably going to be pretty different. And you probably can't even imagine some of the differences that are coming down the pipeline, for better or worse. So step number 1 was to, let me just come back up here, identify what you really want your life to look like. The second step then is to eliminate anything that is incongruent with that. So build laser focus around what you're doing, and eliminating the incongruent means saying no much more often. If something is not aligned with who you want to become, what you want to represent, the role model that you want to become, then don't do it. Think about cause and effect. What you think about and act on each day is ultimately what you achieve. It's not a coincidence that you are in the specific situation that you're in today. That might be a fantastic situation. It might be a tough situation, but it's not a coincidence. These things happen. There's always a little bit of luck involved along the way, but most of who we are happens for a reason. And I think when you start saying no to more projects, it allows you to focus on what you really want to achieve. Another thing to think about here is the time value matrix. And you've probably heard about the 80-20 rule. where 20% of your effort leads to 80% of the results. Well, there's another rule which I try to apply more and more in my life, which is the 64-4 rule. And this is where 4% of your effort leads to 64% of the result. So, that gives you a relative value of 64x, if you like. So you can see on the chart there, 4% of your input resulting in 64% of your output. If you've got, financially, if you're making $1 million, then I could probably say that 20% of your effort is leading to the 800 grand. 4% leads to the next 640. 1% probably leads to $500,000, and so on. And I've seen this to be freakishly accurate time and time again. And if you can get 64% or 2/3 almost of the result by just 4% of the effort, imagine what you might want to do with that, or even just applying the 80-20 rule. Is it time to ditch a few things and focus on others because you're getting 2/3 of the result anyway for only a teeny tiny fraction of the input? Maybe. Certainly something that I think about. And in terms of reaching our goals, we're not kept from our goals because of our obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal. So sometimes we're pulled off track because we are sucked into chasing something else, which might sound easier, but it's still pulling you away from your overarching goal and objective. If you want to be earning $1 million per year from a business that you can run from anywhere and only need to work 3 days a week, if that's your priority, then how are you going to arrange your life so that you can prioritize that above most other things? I'm not saying that you're going to prioritize this over your family or your health or other things that might be incredibly important to you. But if this is something you want to do, then how are you going to arrange your life to achieve that? How are you going to arrange your day, your week, or your month? What are you going to do that's new in your life? What are you going to add into your life? Because to get to somewhere that you haven't been before, you need to do different things, new things. And I think you can always be course correcting. So if you haven't had the success that you've been looking for up until now, maybe there's an opportunity to course correct and add something new or different or a different approach into what you're already doing. And what are you doing that's not important or adding value in your life? There's got to be a bit of fluff there. There's got to be a few things that are incongruent, which you could eliminate. And some of this might be a relationship as well. Like I've had relationships that I've basically had to eliminate because I just felt like they just weren't doing me any good. They weren't having a positive impact on my life, and I eliminated them. I think the compounding effect of your decisions over time can be enormous. And I've seen this pan out personally for me over the last 2 decades. And if I think about some of my friends, 20 years ago, who were in an almost identical situation to me, and some of the decisions that they've made, and at the time I thought, wow, that's interesting. Can't believe they're doing that. And where they are today, it's like there's a compounding effect of these decisions. When you lay a 1% on top of 1% on top of 1%, and you compound that, it makes a huge amount of difference, even just over 1 year, let alone multiple. So I think you need to be aware of this. The third step is building a plan, but do it by working backwards from what you want. So if this one thing is one of your priorities, like getting to that $1 million per year business with a business that you can run in 3 days, if that's a priority, how are you going to arrange your life so you can prioritize that thing over everything else? And you can flip around the thoughts, behaviors to results. So the results come from your behaviors and the behaviors come from your thoughts. And this is, in my mind, a pretty much universal law at this point. Simplifying, keep coming back to this over and over again. Keep it simple, stupid. What would this look like in its simplest form? That's a question that I ask myself over and over again, especially when I'm getting stuck on something, getting bogged down in something. Just simplify it. What can you remove from the list of requirements? Think in terms of the minimum viable product. It's much more important to get something done than to get something done perfectly. And perfection is not when there's nothing left to add. Perfection is when there's nothing left to remove. And I'm a big believer in that one for sure. And I think relating a lot of these ideas back to your 1 to 3 profit business will potentially be a huge help to you. So as I'm going through this, think about where you are in the journey. and what you could change, to take initiative and really sort of pave your own path with that. Systematizing and getting help. An example that comes back to me from about a year and a half ago, before I started my podcast, The Growth Booth, I was speaking to a friend of mine, someone I respect a lot, someone who's been successful over the years. And he said to me, don't start a podcast. It's going to suck up all of your time. And so I sort of automatically thought, but does it have to be that way? How could I do this on 30 minutes a week? And that's now what I do. So for me to be able to run and publish a podcast on a whole range of different platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, have a blog post, search engine optimization, and more, I can do all of that with just 30 minutes of investment of my own time. And I can have a team and I can have systems that do the rest of it. So I think if there's a will, there's a way. If you've got a desire to do something and you want it to happen, you can find a way to happen in a way that fits into your life. I think it's also interesting sometimes to remove yourself from the equation. So what would such and such look like, or how would that be done if you weren't there? So how would your business be able to grow if you weren't there? It could grow if you've got a team set up. It could grow if you've got tools and standard operating procedures in place. And then if you wanted to take a 6-month vacation, you could go away and come back, and hopefully the business would be in a stronger place. But that would only happen if you've got teams or systems in place to allow that to happen. Scheduling is really important, and I like to set aside time to do what needs to be done. But when I set aside time, I set it aside for specific tasks that I'm doing on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis. I don't just have a 2-hour block that says, do some work in this period. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. So this morning, for example, prior to getting on this virtual event, I went through and polished a couple of bits and pieces in the presentations that I've been giving today. And I had that blocked out on my calendar. That was going to be the first thing that I would do this morning. And I made sure I didn't get interrupted in that time. I turned off all my notifications. I shut down, anything that could potentially interrupt me, and charged forward. Now, if you're focusing on 3 things, then like 3 main focuses in your life, then every week should revolve around these 3 things, and your calendar should reflect it. And if you end up spending your time doing other things, then ask yourself the question, like, why are you doing that? What is it that makes you want to do that? If that's not a priority in your life, if that's not getting you closer to where you want to be. When you're not connected to your future self, you make stupid decisions in the present, and you can end up going all over the place. But if you've got that alignment with where you want to get to, it makes it so much easier to line up those strategic decisions and to do the things that you need to do to get you to where you want to be. And everything you do, every action you take, is either a cost or an investment to your future self. So imagine yourself 10 years from now. Even imagine yourself 1 month from now. The things that you're doing today are going to impact who you are and what you have in a month's time. So that decision to sit down and watch a Netflix episode in the evening, it could be costing you something, or it could be an investment. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but just be aware of the impact of doing that. So I like to sit down and watch a good series as much as anyone. Last night I just watched the latest episode of Succession, which is on HBO. And that's a way for me to decompress and do something that my wife and I enjoy doing together, and freshen myself up. I mean, no one's a machine that can be working every waking hour, but I'm aware of the decisions that I'm making and how they are going to impact things in the future. So the 3 steps that we've been through so far: identifying what you want your life to look like, eliminate things that are incongruent. You can do that by start saying no more often, build a plan by working backwards from what you want. And then the 4th step there is to take massive action. So here, what I would encourage you to do is to think bigger and to think faster. So 5x your speed. So if your goal is $500,000 business in 5 years, you might make your goal a $500,000 business in 1 year, or maybe you'll make it that you're going to have a $2.5 million business in 5 years. So we're 5xing that. I did a consultation relatively recently, and I was speaking to someone, and they said, look, my plan is to launch 20 books on Kindle. It's taking 18 hours to write a book. And my first thought was, how could it take so long? Why would this person's involvement need to be so much? How could that be done in 1 hour? That has to get down to 1 hour. Otherwise, it's a bit like, my podcast. If I was doing everything in my podcast myself, it'd probably take me 40 hours a week to be a full-time job, but I can do it in 30 minutes. So how would I be able to implement this Kindle plan, publishing plan, and get it down to under an hour? That's what I would be working to build. So it's a way of thinking about a project or approaching a project. And here, the answer is teams, it's systems, it's simplifying, and it's focus. Keeping your eyes on the prize is really important. Regularly course correcting is important. So if something's not working, what could be changed? What do you need to do differently? If, for example, with your 1, 2, 3 profit business, if you're not where you want to be, how can you turbocharge your results? What can you do? Don't give up before the magic happens, but maybe you can throw more fuel on the fire. Maybe you can move faster. Maybe you can think bigger about what you're doing. Maybe you can add an organic approach that's not going to cost you any money by using like search engine optimization or building an organic component. This is something we'll talk about in the months ahead as well. Sometimes you need to get out of the forest, get out of the trees, and be able to look down above it, look down at the big picture. Often I find that the tactics change, but if my vision is strong, the objective, the place I'm trying to get to, remains the same. So if your objective is financial freedom, you might change your tactics, but the objective doesn't change. It doesn't have to be complicated. I sort of mentioned this earlier. It's not a mere chance that you are where you are right now. For better or worse, the situation that you're in today is a result of all the actions up until this point. And there are elements of luck in there, no doubt about that. But ultimately, though, over a long period of time, that luck tends to normalize a little bit because we all have good luck and we all have some bad luck. But if you can keep pushing forward, chasing a specific objective, then over time you can probably get past any bad luck that you've had and start compounding the wins. And that's when things can really explode. And that's also the great thing about online business, is the situation can change for the better very, very quickly. Like today, for example, you could be going backwards. You could be losing $50 a day. Next month, you could be running at a $100 or $200 per day profit, and then everything has changed. What's the difference between now and a month from now? Maybe nothing. Maybe it's just that you need more time to implement, to execute more, to get more things out there, to crack that code. But if it hasn't happened yet, then at least put yourself in a position where you can objectively look at what you're doing and make a definitive decision about your best path forward. A fuzzy or non-existent vision means the current of life will just push you along, and it'll push you in the direction of where the current is going. Whereas if you imagine you're floating down a river and there's a little island that you could get to if you wanted to, or you could just keep floating past. If you swim towards that island, then you could get there, right? If you just let the current keep pushing you, though, you'll just keep on going down past it. So I think making a deliberate plan is the kind of thing that allows you to own your future and your destiny. Most human behavior is driven by short-term rewards or immediate battles. So it's like, I could do this and this could happen, or I've got to fix that problem. But that's a bit of a negative cycle for a lot of people. And I think when you've got a clear vision, it allows you to ignore those things which are distractions, like something that could give you a short-term reward or something that could pull you off track as a battle. It's not that complicated, but it doesn't mean that it's easy either. You still need to make sure that your actions are congruent with your vision. Otherwise, you're not going to reach the vision. And if you've never done the thing before, maybe you don't have a very clear idea of what the vision is, but it's better to have some vision about your future than none at all. So to recap on these steps here, identify what you want your life to look like, eliminate things that are incongruent with that, start saying no more often. That's one of the easiest things to do that can have huge impact. Build a plan by working backwards. We also sometimes refer to this as reverse engineering and figuring out what you want to do, and then just start taking massive action. But when you take massive action, put your blinders on so that you are focused in on the thing that you need to be focused in on, and try to avoid being pulled off course by the millions of different things that could pull you off course. Now, to wrap up this presentation, something I want to leave you with is in the next 48 hours, spend 10 minutes to really think about what you want. And I don't mean, think while you're watching TV. I mean, deliberately sit down and think about this without any distractions, or go for a walk and consciously think about this. You're going to keep, your mind is probably going, if you're going for a walk, it's probably going to keep getting pulled off. Oh, look what that dog's doing over there. Look at that person over there. Oh, this car's going fast. It's going to get pulled off course. So walking is okay, but I think sitting down and putting pen to paper and thinking about what is it that's really important to you can help you create that objective there. Decide what you need to stop doing. So you can't do everything. You can't do drop shipping and affiliate marketing and Amazon and something else. You can do a couple of things though. And then firm up your plan and just start. So build a plan for the next 90 days. And even if you've started a plan, maybe a few months ago or a couple of months ago, you can still build a new plan for the next 90 days, the next 60 days. Maybe you need to hit the reset button on what you're doing. And that's fine. Build your assets and get your tech sorted. So, your pages that you're going to need, your autoresponder for the 123 profit system, your lead magnets, if you're using anything like that, and get the traffic. Now that can be a stumbling block, but, it shouldn't be, because, there are lots of different ways you can get the traffic coming in and then monitor your results. So, I'm wrapping this presentation up there. Managed to get through it a little bit faster, which is good. You have a bit more of a break there. All right, let's see. How much money did I have tied up to make $1 million? Pretty much nothing, actually. I mean, my first $1 million online I made in sort of a combination between e-commerce and affiliate marketing, and I really didn't have any money tied up at all, really. I would have been doing some advertising, but didn't have money tied up there. You've said that affirmations are more science-based than rah-rah. Would I be willing to share any of that? Yeah, so my thought around this is, I don't believe that if you make affirmations each day and say, I'm going to be making $5,000 passive income per month. I'm going to be making $5,000 passive income per month. I don't think just doing that is going to make the universe magically drop that result into your lap. However, I do think that if you are taking the time to think about that each day, then it's going to be at the forefront of your mind, and you're going to be more likely to find opportunities and more likely to spend time to achieve that thing. So, I don't believe that, rah-rah universe is going to drop that into your lap. But I do believe that consciously spending time thinking about your objectives will help with that. So I don't do affirmations, but I do have a list of pages in my little book that I go through each day, and it allows me to keep the things that are most important to me at the forefront of my mind. So I've got, being a parent, being a friend, being a husband, being a business owner, being a health and fitness enthusiast, being an investor, being an adventurer. These are important to me. I've got lifestyle freedom and memorable moments. This is, this is an idea that I really live my life by. And I've got multiple different pages that I go through here that allow me to keep a lot of this at the forefront of my mind. So I don't do affirmations where I read things out loud, and I don't read the same thing, 100 times or anything like that. But I do have sort of reminders, if you like, that I go through each day. And I think they allow me to keep perspective and just keep in mind what the most important things are in my life. So Ronaline said, sounds a lot like Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Yeah, so a lot of the ideas here actually come from one of his books, which I read. I think the illustrations do as well. So I'll see if I can pull that book up here. He's got some, there it is, Be Your Future Self Now. He's got some really good ideas in there. David, yes, I think you could do that. David Yee. If we invested $10 a day on ads, how long do you think it would take to make $100 per day in profit? I mean, you'd build up to that. So you'd probably aim to be spending $10 and making $10 profit, and then you'd be spending $100 to make $100 profit. How long would that take? How long is a piece of string? It could take 60 days. It could take 120 days. Top performing CPA niche today, my brain, not ChatGPT's. I don't know the answer to that, Kevin. I mean, we've seen great results with things that are related to protection. So, for example, I'm talking about insurance, not like survival protection, but things related to insurance. We've seen great results related to, relationships, great results related to business opportunities, wealth. So that old thing of health, wealth, and was it wellness? I can't remember now. I think you can get any niche, pretty much any niche, to throw off a huge amount of money. I mean, because you only need a tiny slither of a niche to really sort of move the needle there. All right, guys, well, we are going to wrap up just 10 minutes early to give you an extra 10 minutes. And Sean is going to be back with you this afternoon. And I know he's got some interesting presentations prepared. Okay, so thank you for tuning in here. You guys rock. I mean, this goes without saying, but I know that I speak for me and my entire team when I say that you guys really are the VIP customers, if you like, by being part of 123 Profit. And we want to continue to provide value and nurture that relationship. And we've got huge amounts of new content coming your way over the months ahead. We're going to be pushing on with continuing to be there for you, continuing to do office hours every single week with 123 Profit. We're not going anywhere. We want to make sure that we're there with you every step of the journey. So if you're just getting started, or if you need to hit the reset button in your 123 Profit business, then by all means, this is something that I think you can do, and we're going to be there with you every step of the way. Okay.